Every night I woke up unable to move, and there was a figure standing at the foot of my bed. And every night, it was a little closer than the night before, a few inches, just a few inches nearer to me while I lay there, frozen, unable to even scream. I did the math. I knew what was coming. I knew that on some night, very soon, it would finally be close enough to reach the pillow. Welcome back. It's just you and me in the dark tonight. 3 true stories about that specific horror of waking in the night and finding you can't move, and discovering when you can't move that you were never alone in the room. Let's begin. If you've never had sleep paralysis, let me tell you what it's like, because you need to understand it to understand this story. You wake up. Your mind is awake, alert, aware of the room, but your body is still asleep, completely paralyzed. You cannot move a muscle. You cannot speak. You cannot even close your eyes or turn your head. You just lie there, fully conscious, in a body that won't obey you for seconds or minutes that feel like hours. It's terrifying enough on its own. Doctors say it's harmless, a glitch between sleep and waking, and a lot of people in that state see things, shadows, figures, a presence in the room. I know all of that. I read all of that. I told myself all of that every single night for months. It didn't help, because my figure came back, and my figure moved. It started as a shape at the foot of my bed. The first time I woke frozen, it was just there, standing in the dark against the far wall, past the footboard. A tall, dark, person-shaped absence, blacker than the dark around it. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, could only lie there and stare at it with the one part of me that still worked, my eyes, until after a few minutes the paralysis broke, and I could move, and I sat up gasping, and the figure was gone. Just sleep paralysis, just my brain. I believed that. For about a week, because then it happened again, and the figure was closer. It wasn't against the far wall anymore. It was at the foot of the bed, right at the footboard, a few feet nearer than the first time, and the next time, closer still, beside the bed now, halfway up, standing over me. Every episode, every few nights, it had moved, always toward me, always a little nearer to my head. And I began to understand, with a cold and total dread, that this was not a random shape my brain was throwing up. This was a journey. It was crossing my room, one night at a time, and it was coming for the head of the bed. I did everything. Sleep studies, medication, therapy. The doctors were kind and certain. Sleep paralysis, hallucination, stress. Textbook. And none of it stopped the figure from getting closer. I started to dread sleep so badly I'd keep myself awake for days until I'd collapse, and then it would be there, waiting, a little nearer than the last time. I measured its progress across my own bedroom like a prisoner marking a wall, the far wall, the footboard, the side of the bed, beside my shoulder. I stopped telling people after a while because I could see what they were thinking, and it was the same thing the doctors thought, that a frightened, exhausted person will see a frightened, exhausted person's dreams, and maybe they were right. But a dream doesn't keep an appointment. A dream doesn't advance 3 inches and stop, 3 inches and stop, night after night with the patience of a thing that has all the time in the world and knows exactly where it's going. Whatever this was, it was never in a hurry, and that was the part that hollowed me out, the leisureliness of it. It could afford to take months to cross a single room, because it was certain, absolutely certain, that I wasn't going anywhere it couldn't eventually follow. And I knew, the way you know a thing in your bones, that the destination was my face. That one night I would wake up frozen, and it would finally be leaning over the pillow, close enough to touch, and I would not be able to move or scream or do anything at all but look at it. The last night I spent in that apartment, I woke frozen, and it was there, and it was closer than it had ever been. Bent over me, its face inches from mine, close enough that if I could have felt anything, I'd have felt its breath. And I lay there, unable to move, staring up into a darkness shaped like a face, waiting for whatever it had been crossing the room all these months to finally do. And it leaned down, and it put its mouth beside my ear. And in the moment before the paralysis broke and I tore myself awake and ran, it whispered one thing. It said, "Almost." I moved that day, and I haven't had sleep paralysis since, not once in years. The doctors would say the stress is gone, so the glitch is gone, maybe. But I don't think a glitch crosses a room. I don't think a hallucination whispers almost. And I lie awake some nights, even now, wondering if it's still there, in that old apartment, still crossing the room toward a bed I no longer sleep in, or whether it finished its journey and started looking for me. That figure took months to cross one room. The next woman's visitor didn't need to cross anything at all. It was already waiting in the bed every single morning for the exact second her husband's car pulled out of the driveway. Her husband worked early, out the door by 5 in the morning while it was still dark, and she'd stay in bed another hour or two, drifting back to sleep in the warm spot he left behind. And it was in that hour, always, that it happened. The moment the front door clicked shut behind him, every single morning, she would feel the mattress move, a weight settling onto the bed behind her. The specific dip and shift of a body climbing onto the mattress and lying down against her back, where her husband had been moments before, as if something had been waiting for him to leave, and the instant he did, took his place. The first few times, half asleep, she thought he'd come back for something and lain down again. She'd murmur his name, and there'd be no answer. And she'd surface into that frozen paralysis, unable to move, and feel the weight pressed against her back, breathing, and know, with total certainty, that her husband was gone, was in his car, was miles away, and that something else was in the bed with her. It happened every morning. She dreaded 5 a.m. She dreaded the sound of that door clicking shut, because she knew what came next. The pause, and then the mattress dipping, and the weight settling in behind her, patient, familiar, like it belonged there, like it had done this 1,000 times. She'd lie frozen and feel it breathe against the back of her neck, and after a while the paralysis would break, and she'd whirl around, and the bed behind her would be empty, the sheets cool, no dent, no shape, nothing. She told her husband. He didn't know what to say. They tried her sleeping in the middle of the bed, on his side, in another room entirely. It didn't matter. Wherever she slept, the moment he left the house, the weight would find her and climb in and settle against her and breathe. It was tied to him somehow, to the leaving, to the empty space he left in the bed. like it had been waiting a long, long time for its turn and had learned exactly when its turn came. What haunted her most afterward wasn't the weight or the breathing or even the voice. It was that one word, again, just us again. As if this were a resumption, as if there had been a time before her husband, before this house, when it had had her all to itself, and it remembered that time fondly, and it had simply been waiting out the years of her marriage for the arrangement to return to what it considered normal. She couldn't stop wondering how far back it went, whether it had been climbing into the empty side of her bed since she was a girl, whether every man who had ever left her side in the dark had been, without ever knowing it, giving up his place to something that considered the spot beside her its own and was only ever briefly, grudgingly, lending it out. The morning they decided to move, she woke before her husband, and she watched him get up and dress and kiss her goodbye in the dark and go. She heard his car start. She heard it pull away, and she lay there, awake, fully in control of her body this time. No paralysis, determined to catch it, to see it, to prove it. She heard the front door's echo fade. She felt the house go still. And then, in the silence, she felt the mattress behind her dip. The weight climbed in, settled against her back, and a voice, right behind her ear, in the dark, sighed. A long, contented sigh, and said softly, "There, finally, just us again." She was wide awake when it spoke. There was no paralysis to blame, no dream to hide behind. Something got into her bed that morning in her husband's place and told her it was glad to be alone with her at last. They were packed and gone within the week, and she has never since been able to lie in a bed with her back to the open room. That presence only ever wanted the space beside her. The last story tonight is the one that frightens me most because the thing in it didn't just visit her bed. It sat in a chair in the corner and started telling her the night before exactly what she'd say. She'd had sleep paralysis for years. The frozen waking, the figure in the room, the whole terrible thing. She'd made a kind of peace with it. Her figure sat in the chair in the corner of her bedroom. It didn't move like the first stories did. It just sat there, watching whenever she woke frozen. Unpleasant, but she'd learned to endure it, to wait out the paralysis, to tell herself it wasn't real. Then it started to talk. During the paralysis, from the chair in the corner, in a low, even voice, it would say things. And at first the things were nonsense or half-heard, the way dreams are. But over time, they sharpened. And she began to realize that the things it said at night, she would say the next day. Word for word. It would lean forward in the chair, in the frozen dark, and say something like, "You're going to tell your sister you can't make it Sunday. You're going to say you're just too tired." And she'd wake and shake it off and think nothing of it. And then Sunday would come and her sister would call, and she'd hear herself say, "I'm sorry, I just can't make it. I'm too tired." The exact words. The exact words the thing in the chair had put in her mouth the night before. It was telling her in the paralysis what she would say. And then she would say it.
You turned off your phone.
She tested it the way you'd have
You
to.
turned off your phone.
When it told her one
Turn
night
off your phone.
the phrase she'd use in tomorrow's meeting, she went into that meeting determined to say anything else, anything at all, to break the pattern. And she opened her mouth to speak, and the words that came out were the thing's words, exactly as if her own voice weren't hers to command. She could not say them, and she started to understand the horror of what that meant. That the thing in the chair wasn't predicting her, it was deciding her. It was writing her lines the night before in the dark while she lay frozen and made to listen. And then, in the daylight, she performed them, believing they were her own. She started writing things down before she slept, plans, sentences, decisions, so that in the morning she could check them against what she actually said and did and prove to herself that some part of her life was still being authored by her. And most days it matched her own notes and she'd feel a fragile relief. But every so often the words that came out of her mouth matched the thing in the chair instead, and not the page in her own handwriting. And she never knew on any given morning which voice she'd be speaking in until she heard it come out. Imagine that. Imagine not being able to trust, when you open your mouth, whose words are going to come out of it. Imagine lying down each night knowing that the last thing you'll hear before the paralysis takes you is a quiet voice in the corner, calmly writing tomorrow's version of you. She doesn't know how long it had been doing it before she noticed. That's the part that unmade her, because if it could put words in her mouth, and she'd only just caught it, how many of the things she'd said in her life, the choices she'd made, the people she'd pushed away, the chances she'd talked herself out of, how many of those had been hers, and how many had been dictated to her in the frozen dark by the patient thing in the chair, and delivered by her the next day in a voice she only thought was her own. She's still looking for a way to be sure. She told me she's afraid she never will be, because the last thing it whispered to her the night before she wrote to me, leaning forward in the chair in the frozen dark, in that low, even voice, was every word of the message she then sat down and sent me the next morning, including this part, the part I'm reading to you now. That's all for tonight. If this one's got you dreading the moment you close your eyes, then you already know what to do. Subscribe and hit that bell, because there's a brand new true horror story here every single night, and you won't want to miss the next one. Give it a like so it reaches the next person lying awake in the dark, and share it with someone who's had a night like this. I'll be right here tomorrow night when the lights go down. Sleep well, if you can.
Like, share, and subscribe for daily horror stories every single day.